Agni Zotis here with the Educators Edition and Make Kids Transform. Today, we're so honored to have Debra Anderson in the house. Yes. Debra is an educator, a yogi, an ex-gallerist, and that's how we met a very long time ago. But you became my yoga student and then went into education, which I was, by the way, extremely thrilled because I was like, man, those kids are getting like this amazing hero that's going to inspire them with her kindness and her vision.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So I view educators as heroes, and they have these superpowers, and they could either be superheroes or supervillains, because in many ways they could inspire souls, youth, their students to open up boundaries and conquer and see the world in other ways, or they could destroy dreams. And I do feature the best ones that I think that I had the pleasure of working with or knowing one way or another. So I'm very interested in your journey and how you came to be an educator and what your background is, like what got you into this.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Now, talk about that. So, my mom is the one that inspired me to become a teacher. I think because growing up, I had a younger sister, still have a younger sister, but our age gap is 10 years difference. So when I was 10, she was being born and so on. And I always, wanted to help her with things. She would make these little drawing books and little tiny scraps of paper. She'd come up to me with them with drawings on them and say, hey, can you staple this for me? And then I'd say, yeah. And we'd look at the book together and helped her draw a little bit. And it's gone on like that through to adulthood, where she's made zines and she helps her husband now with his publication. And she's very creative on her own and has clients and does different artistic work. So, that just kind of blossomed because of who she is. And, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do in college, but I knew I wanted it to be art. So she said, well, why don't you become a teacher? Why don't you try that? And I had been already in this program for graphic design, but I felt it was very deadline driven. So once I got into the actual physical making of paintings and drawings and learning about like how people's brains work and societal connections and all of those things, that's when it just went ding, 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 this is it. So that's kind of how I got into it. And I took a little break in between there where you and I met to go live in New York City, because as soon as I started teaching, I knew I really liked it, but I was missing something. I had all this education and knowledge and studio time and all that stuff from my undergraduate degree. And I knew I still had to get a graduate degree, but I thought I'm missing a real world connection. So that's where I got into being in New York City and being, taking my picture framing skills and working in the gallery space and getting my master's degree in art marketing. And it just went from there. Long road.
That's great. Yeah, I didn't know, honestly, when I knew you. I didn't know you were an educator.
Yeah, it was let's see, a couple of years before, that I was working, and I just had the chance to go to New York. I said, well, it's now or never, because I wasn't really tied down by anything. I had nothing holding me back, and I had the adventure inside of me to say, let's take a chance. So that's what I did. And, after my time in New York, I was missing being a teacher. And I thought, well, maybe this is my time to, go back. So I came back to my hometown, and it is now, that's been 11 years since I've been back from New York City.
Really?
Yeah, it's a long, long time,
So
actually.
we were together a while ago. I thought it was just less
Yeah.
than 10 years. Now it's more.
Yeah, because I,
14, right? Like 14
yeah,
years.
yeah, because I moved back around 2013. I was just finishing my first graduate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so now we're going 2025, a couple months. So
I know. Plus,
I,
yeah, I mean, you were also like my student for a couple of years, if I
yeah,
remember.
yeah.
It was a long time ago. Wow, time flies. I'm always like, oh, it's about 10 years. Meanwhile, it's like, anyways.
Oh, pretty close, actually. Yeah.
um, that's fantastic. Uh, what's what do you do in what school?
Okay, so the school I'm at now, um, I love it. It's the school I went to school at.
How
And
cool.
I just love that. I get to go back to my roots, and it's literally 4 minutes down the street. I could walk there if I wanted to. But I teach drawing and painting there to high school kids, and I teach an advanced level version of that class too, which has a college and the high school component. And that's a really nice extra add-on because they can earn some college credit. You have a lot of good opportunities for them in that regard. So I actually just got my rosters for this year. Going on my third year there. And I'm excited. I have a lot of kids from last year that are returning to my advanced class and some new faces. So it's going to be great.
It's wonderful. Last time we spoke, which was pre-COVID, I was at a different school. You were also incorporating mindfulness. Are you still doing that?
Well, in bits and pieces, I would say. I have not necessarily brought in like a whole program, but there's times when I'll say, okay, we're going to work on this particular learning unit. So, for instance, Zentangle. I've done Zentangle with my younger kids. And I'll say, a really important component of this is relaxing and allowing your creativity to come through, especially for younger students that might not have the emotional regulation yet of how to calm down and center themselves. So I do have them do like a quieting moment for themselves to settle down before we actually begin the process of creating the work. And I just actually went through a program with other art teachers where we did something called the creativity stretch. And it's got a similar mindfulness component. It only takes a couple of moments to sort of settle yourself down, but it's, doing some neck rolls and breathing in and out and just feeling yourself centered on your chair and your feet planted. And then the prompt comes through and it helps. It helps you to kind of get, in the space ready to actually work and begin. So I'd like to integrate that into my program this year. Since it worked so well for us adults, hopefully translates for our kids too.
Honey, I just did that before we started. It's like great practice. It's so basic and gentle and honestly, that's all it's really needed. But
Yeah, center yourself, just focus on what's going to come through you. And because, for us human beings, we have a lot coming at us all day long, and whether it's in your work day or, we're in a school environment with bells are ringing and you got to run here, you got to run there and eat water, and you're hungry. And if your teacher is just like, okay, this is 4 minutes just for you to center and focus, it can make such a difference for us too. We do it too.
I think it's fantastic to do it, honestly. I think it's a great practice and also bring it to the kids in any class before starting any class. Where do you see going with this?
with the mindfulness work or with
all of it, with teaching? How do you, I think more importantly, the question is what has shifted after COVID, if you see a shift in the students?
wow, that's a good question. It's interesting because it sort of depends on the population of students, I think, because I've been in two different environments through COVID and after COVID. And so the first environment was a more rural community. And that community of students, their town, one of the biggest things in their town is a prison. And so, that shifts who lives in the community and who comes to the community and, who even might just be living there their whole life long. There's this prison there, and that could really change your day to day, right? But there's other things in the community too. There's lots of farming. There's great community resources. The school is wonderful. And in the community that I'm working in now, it's more of a suburban community. There is, I would say, less poverty. I wouldn't say there's no poverty because you could find poverty anywhere, but I would say it's a little bit more well-to-do type of environment. And so between the two school environments or community environments, there might be more access or resources to different things, and there might be different attitudes around mental health, wellness, etc. So I think depending on the community, you see some recovery shifting quicker based on the population, but I'm not a scientist by any means, so I don't have any data to be able to track. It's just my, what I see with my kids. I still see a lot of mental health needs. I still see a lot of kids that are really needing connection, community, just wanting to be accepted for who they are. And I think we're going to be working on that for a long time. And I think it's very helpful if the teacher is just meeting the student where they are. Like, hey, I see you're having a bad day. Why don't you just take a couple of minutes if you need it? If you want to work in this side of the room with nobody, sit in the beanbag chair, go for it. If you want to talk it out, let's talk it out. So as a teacher, I think for me, that's my approach is I just try to see the student where they're at. How can I help them? And then is there a space where they might need to go that day? Like, okay, this isn't really working for you today. Maybe you really need to go to your counselor and, we can work on this tomorrow. So it's having the flexibility.
Wow.
That helps me get the kids, hopefully back to where they're functioning at a healthy level.
Well, that's what makes a good teacher, by the way, is actually being able to see your students, right?
Yeah.
And whoever the student is, whoever the teacher is, it's exactly the same principle, because once you miss that, then it's done. So you talked about these two different communities, right? What were the differences? Because these exist, right? And we see it everywhere. I mean, in any neighborhood, there's good schools, bad schools. So what do you think defines that? Like, what does that mean in a very basic way? And listen, you don't need to be a scientist. You're an educator. You're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of youth. If you're not a scientist, I don't know who is. Sorry, I mean, your classroom is the lab.
Yeah, I see it that way. Yeah. Well, I think it's just a culture, like you walk into a culture that might be different from yours and you try to learn from it, and so I didn't come from that first community, but that community is adjacent to my community. It's probably about half hour away by car. And it's just a completely different culture, different priorities. Like work is a very top priority for a lot of my students. So when we were in COVID doing the remote learning, sometimes the families would say to me, like, I need my kid to go to work.
Wow.
They'd have to work and miss their lesson. And so, you know, we tried really hard to meet those students where they were. Like, okay, you're going to miss your lesson. So make sure you check up online with me. Make sure, you know, let's talk on the phone. What did you miss? And that was a really difficult time. But we did the best that we could because it was unprecedented times. Versus, you know, I don't know what it was like in the community where I am now. There might have been students that had to do that and hide that fact, or, you know, they might have had siblings they had to watch on top of doing their schoolwork on the computer. And you just never, ever know what people are going through. And it's just another moment where you say, okay, well, what is going on in this culture? What do they value? How can I meet them there? And how can I build a relationship so that we have an understanding of how we're going to meet the need, basically, right? It's a very complicated process, but you can do it. You can do it.
It is a complicated process, and poverty is completely connected to education. And convincing parents. The statistics, by the way, are insane. Like 80% of kids that don't graduate will be in poverty, where they will never lift their heads. I mean, severe, because they think like whatever the minimum wage is now, it's much better. But it's like when you come of age and that continues to be, you just can never get out of this box of poverty. What were the challenges? Because this is so important what you're saying, because most of the world lives in poverty.
The challenges
of the students that you saw for it. Yeah.
I think just kind of getting to school and doing the work and attendance, you know. Attendance was always a big thing because, you know, you miss your seat time, you miss your lesson, you miss the connection with your peers, and then your sense of community is kind of like waning. So that was something that we worked really hard on, like making sure kids would come to school. Like at that other school, administration would do home visits and say like, hey, what's going on? How can we help you? And I valued that so much because, you know, I had however many students. I can't go to every single one of their homes and say, hey, why weren't you in the Zoom today? I'm like, why didn't you come to school today? And, you know, I can make phone calls and I can send emails and I can write letters and everything. But having that one-to-one connection with somebody where they're like, oh, well, actually, they really do care. That's enormous. You know, somebody comes to your house from school. Oh, they care enough to drive over and check on me. I think that makes a world of difference, you know.
Is that the individual teacher that does that, or does the school have somebody that does that?
With some administration from our school that would do that. And I believe also sometimes the school resource officer would go and make a home visit, like a special ed teacher, people that could, you know, be the face of the school and support us as the teachers and getting them back to a routine and just kind of saying like, hey, how can we support you? And as a side note, the administration also did that for us teachers. So there were moments where I would be working, you know, maybe finishing my school day and the doorbell would ring and somebody from the administration was there like, hi, you know, we just wanted to reach out. And they were funny. They brought me a roll of toilet paper because toilet paper was in short supply. If you're
this is during COVID.
Yeah. And they brought me scratch off ticket.
A scratch off ticket?
Yeah, for fun, you know, and a little t-shirt and it said teaching remotely since 2020. And it was to pick me up, you know, it was like social distance just to pick me up, like, hey, we care about you. This is a small token of appreciation. And you're in there, you're like wearing your sweatpants and your nice shirt so you look good on the Zoom. And then an administrator pops by. It's kind of funny. But I think from my perspective, I appreciated that. So I can only imagine like how the kids felt, like, whoa. So that was really cool.
Amazing. Amazing. What prior to COVID, what were the issues with the kids?
Oh wow. Prior to COVID, I think attendance was still sort of an issue. From time to time, not as bad though. And in that particular setting, I think just kind of getting them to break out of their shells, normal teenage things like not being so worried about, what's going on social media. What did this person say about me? Let's make connections in the classroom. Let's make friends. And, that's something I've been trying to build upon is how do I create classroom harmony? Because you get a mix of people and they might not all be friends, but through activities, there's certain, relationship building activities, you can build that small community where somebody from, this side of town might not normally hang out with somebody from this side of town, and they connect or they have completely different interests. So this year I had a girl from Denmark. She came all the way over here to do an exchange program, and she made friends with a student that moved here from Colorado, and they're the least likely friends, right? But they bonded over something as simple as like, oh, who doesn't like this color, this version of the color of the paint that we're using? I hate this color. And they were just bonding over that. And it was really cool. So, just those silly things, making the bond, making the connections. The cell phones, the vaping, like a lot of that has been a challenge. I think as a world, like educationally, we're getting better at tackling those things. I have students that are very against not having their phones, but they don't recognize yet because they haven't experienced the long-term effect of what these phones are distracting them from their engagement with others. And I'm happy to see that sort of like our state union is starting to talk about, okay, we're going to try to get these phones out of the school system.
Wow. Is that conversation starting?
Yeah, the union president, she was on the news not that long ago, a couple days ago, talking about how are we going to start cell phone free environments, which my current school has. We use these pouches where you put the phone in it. When they come to school, it locks with a magnet, and then that stays on them all day, so they don't feel like their property is taken, but they cannot access it until the end of the day when it unlocks. However, some students have learned how to bypass this.
Of course.
So they can get around it. But, we're kind of like, you can't do that.
I'm like, cool kids, of course. We're hacking serious systems as kids. Imagine.
There's always a way. There's always a way. But I think that, to answer your question, it's vaping, it's, societal pressures, peer pressures, and drugs are still a problem,
Are they? I was going to ask you, because last time we spoke, again, pre-COVID, about, you had mentioned that.
Yeah, drugs.
What kind of drugs?
Well, I don't really necessarily know. I only know what, is hearsay, but I suspect, just from different things that I've observed, that because marijuana is now recreational, it's in the homes.
Everywhere.
And
everywhere.
Another thing, we don't know what the long-term effects are yet. I've even asked doctors about this, what is the outcome of somebody, for instance, utilizing medical marijuana for different symptoms they might have as opposed to pharmaceutical drugs or behavioral therapy. And the doctor point blank told me we don't have enough research or data on that yet to understand or know. So it's like we're playing with fire a little bit here with the phones and the drugs because we have no idea what's the outcome for their future, the young people.
The young people, right?
It's a little scary.
There's, I don't know if you're familiar with Andrew Huberman. He did a podcast. He's a neuroscientist out of Stanford.
Okay.
And there's like a 3-hour podcast that he talks about the research-based, all research-based. And he talks about that, actually, about the effects of weed on the mind. I mean, in New York City, like, it just reeks like weed.
I believe you.
I mean, everybody's smoking, and I'm not necessarily against it, but I don't know if the young people should be smoking weed all day and it's casual. Is that the only drug, or is there anything heavy? I'm just curious about the drug culture now.
That I honestly do not know.
Yeah, you would know, wouldn't you, though? Because the heavier stuff is obvious.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I'm sure, like, if I was in a different position, for instance, like if I was in an administrative position, I would probably be privy to those details because, if a student is coming in and they have something in their bag or whatever, they're going to know. They're going to find out. It's just a matter of time. But I don't know. I really don't know what's out there. I know, at my old school, we did have conversations about fentanyl coming in the area because where that school's located, it's right on the New York State Thruway. So, fentanyl is coming up the thruway and being distributed. And there was a lot of billboards in that community as well about the effects of fentanyl. And fentanyl is not just fentanyl. It's in some marijuana. It's in some other drugs. So if you're using it, it's like the filler for whatever. So I know our health teachers, they are talking to students about using Narcan. And so if you're seeing somebody in your daily life that looks like they are overdosing, this is how you administer Narcan. So, I'm really amazed that the health teachers actually, they work right next door to me, and the type of resources they bring into their classroom, they bring in recovered people, they bring in officers, they have so much knowledge that they're sharing out to our students, and it's worlds beyond what we learned in school.
Yeah.
So I do know that education is coming to them, which I'm very grateful for.
Me too. Where do you see education going?
Oh, wow. That's a really great question. I think things will change for the better in that. What I mean by that is I think students are going to have more choice around how they take information in because we're getting so much more knowledge and awareness of how do people learn and how can you accelerate your learning by understanding, how you best learn. Are you a visual learner? Are you an audio learner? Are you a hands-on learner? And I think there's more coming to students about that. And I think we're going to have more pathways. So, for instance, one of the pathways that we have for art is called the IAAP, Individualized Arts something pathway. I can't remember the whole acronym. We just started learning about it. And it's how you can get certain credits to graduate that lead you to an art pathway. So you don't necessarily have to have like this many credits to get the degree. You can do it all in art with your core subjects as well, but you can have that focus on art, which I love because that means my students could take 5 art classes and they don't just max out on 1 or 2 or 3. And that's what I wanted when I was a kid. I remember sitting in the car saying to my parents, why can't I just do all my art classes. Why do I have to take this class or that class? And, you need to be well-rounded, but it's nice that you could individualize your learning like that. So I think that's coming. But it's a slow roll. We've been trying to get there for a long time.
It's a massive system, so it's hard to mobilize it.